Hi, I'm Dr. Carmen Morrison. I'm a psychologist, brain coach, and co-founder here at Alli.
Hi, I'm Drew Morrison. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am also a coach and a co-founder here at Alli.
And we wanted to talk today about something that's really critical for relationship and also ties into how our brains facilitate or get in the way of what we want in relationships, and that is the topic of vulnerability. So we hear a lot in everyone's favorite. Like You hear a lot about that online. There's a lot of stuff you could just type in vulnerability and get all kinds of blogs and posts. But what we often find with people that we coach is that we understand the word, but when it comes to actually how do we do that in the practical nitty-gritty of relationship, that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
Right?
No, thanks.
Yeah. Well, that's oftentimes,
that's the feeling.
Especially if we've had bad experiences of vulnerability, the feeling is, I really want to stay away from that.
Yeah, which, let's be real, we've all had a bad experience at some point.
Who hasn't?
You can't get through life without, at some point, putting yourself out there.
And having somebody drop you there.
Yeah, feeling a little squashed.
Right. Yeah. And so let's think about why is vulnerability so important for relationship? We'll talk about how it ties into the brain, but also what are some practical things that we can do
for sure
when we hit those places where vulnerability is needed, and yet we have this feeling of oh no, this is the last thing I want to do. So maybe we could talk about that. So why is vulnerability such a big deal? Why do we hear it everywhere online?
Yeah, well, I think when I think of vulnerability specifically in the context of really any relationship, it's letting ourselves be seen, letting me be seen on a really deep level on kind of how I experience myself. So I always think of that like in a relationship with a spouse, and we're always in that place on a very deep level, maybe even the most. I call it the basement level. You know, the lowest level is if we're really wanting to be seen. We're really wanting to connect with people, and if we're talking, continuing the analogy of a basement in a building, right? Throughout life, there's a lot of other floors that get added that keep the basement level protected, and so the importance of vulnerability is being able to let ourselves be seen so that we can be seen, so that we can receive that thing that we so desperately want.
Yeah, because as you're saying that, what comes to mind for me is that there is no such thing as a deeply bonded, deeply connected relationship without vulnerability. It's the gateway. Right, it's the door we have to pass through in order to have what we want. So often what we do is we're trying to have this deep relationship with someone, whether it's my son. By the way, we didn't mention that at the beginning.
We're related.
Yeah. And so this is something that we have to practice even in our own relationship as mother and son.
Yep.
We work together, we partner together, we do videos together, podcasts together. So one of the things that comes up all the time is that we want this relationship with a significant person to us, but we don't want to have to be vulnerable. And so it's like everything we want is on the other side of that gate, but that gate just feels locked shut for us, or just has a big sign on it that says, we'll electrocute you if you touch it, stay away. So vulnerability is essential. We cannot have the meaningful relationship that we long for without it. What is it that makes that so hard for us?
Scary. Being seen, right? Especially if you have
Well, what is it we're scared of?
Hurt. Getting hurt, right? Putting yourself out there only for the other person to miss you, as in not see you, right? To go past you, to not catch your vulnerability, to not catch you putting yourself out there, and you kind of fall flat.
Well, I kind of think maybe there's two specific kinds of hurt that we fear most. One is rejection.
Yep.
So if you see me and you send me a message that you don't like what you see, that's really painful.
Yep, that sticks with you.
That a long time.
Yep.
And then the other is abandonment. If I put myself out there and you just don't even show up, or you turn and you leave, and you leave me there, those I think are two really critical fears and hurts that we can experience. Maybe there's a third one, which is that you won't accept me. You'll see me, and then you'll, which is the other side of rejection. But that you're not going to want what you see, and then reject me. And so I think maybe those are the specific hurts. So what can we help our listeners with in terms of what to do when we hit that gate that is scary because we've been hurt there before? We fear being hurt again, but everything we want in relationship is on the other side of that gate. What can we do that will help in those moments?
Well, I think first off, it's kind of twofold. It's one thing that we can do for ourselves, right? And sitting with that in ourselves. And then the other piece of it is finding somebody that we can take that to talk about it with, to not be alone in that. Because, sitting with that is hard when we do that by ourselves. But taking that to somebody is also really uncomfortable, but so important, so that we can start to change that process, right? Because we talk a lot about habits and wiring the brain, and this is also honestly a piece where that intersects with this topic as well. That when we have had lifetime years, however many that fits for you, where you've done kind of the same movement, you've done the same pattern with being vulnerable, you've got to change that up at some point, right? And so being able to find somebody that even just feels the most safe, right? Even maybe it's not fully safe, but safe. Giving that a try, trying something new, trying something different, putting yourself out there just maybe a little bit more than is fully comfortable, to start breaking that habit.
And I like how you're breaking that down, because there's always risk associated with vulnerability, right? So the fears are the things that we're risking, and yet we long for those things relationally that are on the other side of that vulnerability gate. So when we break that down, one of the things we talk about that comes from Dr. Sue Johnson is slicing it thinner, like making, if sharing everything that I am feeling inside, all of my fears and longings, feels too risky, I can break that down to where it's tolerable. It might still, there's always going to be a risk, but I can slice it thin enough so that it's tolerable. So can we come up with an example of that? So if I'm something happens to you, and as your mom, I'm really afraid that it's my fault because I screwed you up. But I don't say that to you because I'm really afraid that if I say that to you, you're going to lose respect for me. And that would be a rejection. And that feels too risky. Maybe a way of slicing that thinner and making that within what I can tolerate, enough risk that I can tolerate, would be to say, I'm really struggling with something that comes up when you talk about this, whatever this is, but I'm kind of afraid to tell you about it because I'm afraid that if I do, that you're going to lose respect for me and see me differently, and I'm really afraid of that. So that's just kind of backing it up. If talking about what I'm afraid of is too risky, I can talk about how I'm afraid of talking about that. I'm afraid of the fear of talking about it, and so that just slices it thinner and it brings it down to where it's tolerable for me, but it's still vulnerable enough to open the connection with the other person.
Yeah, and you're talking about in the context of parenting, and I know one of the ways that I talk about vulnerability in the context of romantic relationships is to, even going off of slicing it thinner, is to even say what's going on for you right then in that moment, so that you've been in arguments with your spouse before, my dad. I've been in
Once
arguments.
Or twice.
I know. I've been there for some of them. I've been in arguments with my wife before, and there's a lot going on internally, and so to be able to say that, what I always like to say to people that I coach is, that's fair game. That is fair game to say, I'm having a hard time right now. I need a break, or like a 5-minute break, or I have a hard time right now. I have a lot of emotions going on. Because even that is a vulnerable statement.
Because it lets something be seen, even
Correct.
if it's not everything. And really, those are not different, because in the first example, it was me with an adult child. So it's just me talking to another adult, but it happens to be an adult who's very important to me.
Sure.
So whether it's a romantic relationship, a good friendship, a family relationship, vulnerability is really key to everything that we long for. And yet, when those fears get really big, it becomes a barrier to everything that we long for. And oftentimes we don't realize that it's our fear of vulnerability that's the barrier. We think it's the other person doing something that puts up that barrier. So beginning to work with our own fears of vulnerability, what comes up for us that makes that really hard, and finding ways, if it feels too much, to be completely open about something, to slice that thinner and still let ourselves be seen, let the other person know that something is happening, even if we're too afraid to show all of that, and to talk about the fear of letting them know that, even if we can't let them know it just right in that moment. So that's a good way to start practicing vulnerability, is to just think about how much can I give to the other person to let them see what's actually happening in me in the relationship, and pushing that gate open just a little bit, and oiling those hinges so that it gets better and better, and lets us move towards the connected relationship we really long for. So here at Alli, we have intensive course where we coach you through how to do this with significant people in your life. We have a whole bunch of learning modules on different aspects of being vulnerable with significant people, and some really excellent relationship coaches. So we'll put the links for all of that down below, things that are really helpful. Everything we do here is designed to take what we know from science that works, and put it in a package that makes it doable for you, that works with your brain, so that you can take small steps, achievable steps, that get you to where you want to go. So please do check out some of those resources down below.
Yes, and if you're liking the content that we are putting out here about the tips, talking about relationships and how to work with your brain and not against it, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, so that you get notifications of when we have all of these awesome videos. Obviously I have some bias there, but and follow us along as we continue the conversations.